The night had fallen heavy over Blackwater Creek, the moon casting silver streaks across the rippling waters, and the air smelled of pine and damp earth, carrying with it a quiet sense of waiting, of secrets that refused to remain buried. The cowboy, whose name had long been whispered in town but never spoken aloud by those who truly knew him, sat on the creaking wooden porch of his weathered cabin, boots scuffed and hands calloused from years of hard labor, the weight of his own past pressing on him like the heat of a summer sun that never let him rest. He had lived among shadows and ghosts, both real and imagined, and though his outward demeanor was stoic, almost impenetrable, inside, a storm raged, memories of loss, betrayal, and moments of tenderness he had never been allowed to embrace. She appeared then, almost like a wisp of smoke drifting through the night, her presence undeniable, soft yet insistent, the kind of presence that made even the wind hold its breath. Her eyes, wide and unguarded, met his with a courage he had not seen before, and her voice, when she spoke, trembled with vulnerability that cut straight through the layers of armor he had spent decades building. "Will you stay, if I undress?" she asked, her words simple, almost naive, yet weighted with a daring intimacy that left him momentarily paralyzed, the kind of question that demanded more than a yes or no. It demanded the reckoning of his own fear of closeness, of connection, of letting someone truly see him without the facade he wore so carefully. He shifted in his chair, eyes scanning the horizon as if seeking answers from the stars or the distant hills, and he felt the pull of something long denied, a desire not just for her body, but for trust, for the chance to be needed and, in turn, to give what he had kept hidden for so long. Memories of past failures, of lives lost and hearts broken, flickered through his mind like candle flames in the wind, threatening to scorch what little hope had begun to take root. Yet there was something in her, something unyielding, fierce yet tender, that demanded he confront the darkness he had carried, the loneliness he had accepted as fate. As she stepped closer, barefoot on the wooden boards that creaked under each deliberate movement, he felt a tremor in his chest, a vibration that was both fear and longing, the recognition that to stay with her, to answer her unspoken plea, meant confronting parts of himself he had spent years running from. The creek below murmured softly, a lullaby to the night, and he could hear the flutter of her breath, the gentle sway of her hair catching the moonlight, and it was in that moment that the world narrowed to the space between them. The heat of proximity, the unspoken words, the ache of past wounds mingling with the fragile hope of what might be possible. He reached for her hand, tentative, almost afraid she might vanish like a dream if he moved too boldly, and when their fingers touched, it was like lightning in a bottle, sudden and fierce, igniting a warmth that spread through his chest and down to his fingertips, reminding him that he was still alive, still capable of feeling more than the numbness he had grown accustomed to. Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to speak but didn't know how, and he understood that she too bore scars, not visible, but etched deep within her soul, the kind of wounds that could only be healed by trust, by patience, by someone willing to see the beauty in vulnerability rather than recoil from it. Outside, the wind rustled the trees in a rhythm that seemed to mirror the pulse of their hearts, and for a brief, suspended moment, the weight of the world faded, leaving only the two of them suspended in a fragile bubble of possibility. He remembered the nights alone by the fire, staring into flames that reflected the hollowness he had felt, and now, with her presence beside him, he saw a path that had been invisible before, a path not just toward companionship, but toward redemption, toward the kind of intimacy that demanded courage and honesty. The night deepened, shadows folding into one another, and yet he felt a lightness he had long thought impossible, a reminder that connection, though terrifying, could also be saving. He drew her closer, careful, deliberate, aware that each gesture carried the weight of unspoken promises and the potential to shatter or to heal, and when she leaned into him, letting the warmth of her body brush against his, he realized that he was standing at the precipice of something profound, a crossing from solitude to shared existence, from darkness to the glimmer of trust. Words were unnecessary, their silence spoke volumes, a language of trembling hands and steady eyes, of shared breaths and hearts daring to open in tandem. In that night, surrounded by the hush of Blackwater Creek, he understood that staying was no longer a question of desire alone. It was a choice, a commitment to confront the deepest parts of himself in order to protect, cherish, and honor the fragile gift of her presence. And as the first whispers of dawn began to paint the horizon in soft shades of gold and lavender, he felt the stirrings of hope, a cautious but undeniable spark that perhaps, for the first time in years, he was not alone, and that the night, with all its darkness and secrets, had given way to the possibility of something enduring, something worth fighting for, something that could finally allow two wounded souls to find solace and courage in each other's arms. The morning light filtered softly through the worn curtains of the cabin, casting golden stripes across the floorboards, and the cowboy awoke to a quiet stillness that felt almost sacred, as if the world itself had paused to witness the fragile bond that had formed overnight. The weight of yesterday's confessions and whispered vulnerabilities lingered between them like the morning mist, and he found himself staring at her sleeping form, noting the subtle rise and fall of her chest, the way the sunlight kissed her hair, and realizing that this quiet intimacy, was a treasure far beyond anything he had ever known or dared to imagine. There was a tension in him, a tight coil of fear and hope, for he knew the past would always try to creep in, to remind him of the wounds that had shaped him, but in her presence, those reminders were softened, less frightening, tempered by the warmth of mutual trust. She stirred, blinking awake, eyes meeting his with that same fierce vulnerability that had first drawn him in, and she gave him a tentative smile that spoke volumes, a promise unspoken yet undeniable, that whatever darkness he carried, she would not flinch, that she would walk alongside him even if the night returned to haunt them. He rose, boots creaking on the wooden floor, and moved to the small kettle on the stove, filling it with water and letting the aroma of brewing coffee settle into the cabin, a mundane ritual imbued with significance now, a symbol of normalcy he had long thought lost to him. Conversation began hesitantly at first, fragments of words about the weather, the creek, the town's distant gossip, but soon it deepened, flowing like the river outside, revealing dreams, regrets, laughter that bubbled up unexpectedly, and tears that were shed quietly but without shame, each one a testament to the courage it took to open one's heart fully. He spoke of the nights spent riding through empty fields, the solitude he had once cherished as a shield, and how it had become a prison. She shared her own stories, not of grandeur but of survival, of small victories and quiet sorrows, and in that exchange, a fragile understanding took root, binding them together with threads of empathy and shared humanity. The creek, shimmering under the morning sun, seemed to reflect not just light but the possibility of renewal, the idea that even in places touched by darkness, hope could thrive if one dared to nurture it. Afternoon came, and they ventured outside, boots crunching over gravel paths, hands brushing tentatively before eventually entwining, a natural progression that neither forced nor feared the depth of connection forming between them. He taught her the rhythm of tending horses, the patience required to coax trust from wary animals, and in turn, she taught him how to laugh freely again, how to allow himself small indulgences, fleeting moments of lightness that he had long denied himself. By the time the sun began its slow descent behind the distant hills, painting the sky in bruised purples and fiery oranges, he realized that he had not just survived the night, but that he had been transformed by it, reshaped by the courage of a woman willing to see him in his entirety, flaws and all. And when she looked at him, eyes glistening with the reflection of the fading sun, and whispered words that spoke of trust, of staying, of shared futures yet unknown, he understood that love, messy, imperfect, terrifying as it was, had found its way into the hollow corners of his life. Evening descended, the creek murmuring its lullaby once more, and they returned to the cabin, weary but emboldened by the intimacy of the day, knowing that the night ahead would be different, not because darkness had vanished, but because they now faced it together. There were moments of silence, comfortable and reassuring, punctuated by shared glances, soft touches, the kind of connection that required no words yet conveyed everything one needed to understand, that they were no longer alone, that vulnerability had been transformed from weakness into strength, that love had been forged in the quiet crucible of shared pain and mutual courage. As night wrapped the creek in its velvet cloak once again, he drew her close by the fire, feeling the steady rhythm of her heartbeat against his, and he whispered promises, not of perfection, not of a life without struggle, but of presence, of commitment, of standing together against whatever storms the world might bring. They spoke little, yet every gesture carried the weight of unspoken vows, the warmth of a bond cemented in honesty and tenderness, and he realized that the scars he had once feared revealing were no longer chains but symbols of resilience, and that in her acceptance, he had found not only solace but the courage to hope, to dream, to believe that love could truly endure. The creek outside shimmered under moonlight, each ripple reflecting the story of two souls converging, healing, and daring to step into the unknown together, a reminder that even in the darkest nights, the human heart could find its way to light. And as they finally rested, side by side, a quiet contentment settling over them like a gentle blanket, he knew that he would never again question the power of connection, the transformative magic of vulnerability, and the truth that staying, even when fear loomed, was the greatest courage of all. In Blackwater Creek, under the eternal gaze of stars that had witnessed countless untold stories, a cowboy once hardened by loss and a woman brave enough to see him fully had discovered that love was not about perfection, but about daring to be seen, daring to stay, and daring to embrace the possibility of healing together, one day, one touch, one shared breath at a time, and as the fire dwindled to glowing embers. They drifted into sleep knowing that whatever darkness lay ahead, they would face it as one, their hearts forever intertwined, their souls finding refuge in the quiet certainty that they had finally found home in each other.